Good evening. The hour being after 6:45 p.m. It's my high honor and privilege to call the November 14th, 2024 school committee meeting to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go flying.
Unfortunately, before we begin our agenda, we do have the need for a moment of silence for Ms. Dolores Alma Eptham, who taught with us for over a quarter century on 2 stints, as well as being a member of this body in between in her retirement. She was a dame. She was a tremendous educator and life coach for many of her students. She's greatly missed by our Walpole public school community. So a moment of silence for her. Thank you very much. Our first order of business after the call to order is recognition, which is the part of our meeting that we enjoy the most, especially with the big MCAS update later in the meeting. This is the part where we get to recognize. We figured we would bring in some spring-like art, and so we have Walpole High School students who painted Jersey barriers, as well as the students who painted the ducks. We'll start with the Jersey Barrier Project, and I would like to call upon TJ Bergeron and Sandy Allison if you'd like to come up and introduce the subject matter for us.
I'll speak on behalf of the Jersey Barriers. It was sort of something that came to Ms. Allison over here early in the year from the Trails Committee and Gary down there, and they, as I understand it, had need for these barriers that were in a new parking area for this new trailhead to be kind of decorated and get some life in there. So earlier this month, we went there, coded it, and then a bunch of these guys over here kind of killed it and threw a bunch of their designs that were approved, and then a really long kind of cold Saturday, we all kind of got together and painted away for several hours. I know people were here for all different stints. We have some people who designed the murals and a lot who kind of just helped out with them, for the barriers rather. But it was a really great time, and I think it's exciting to see some color out there as well. And I hope everyone enjoys them for as long as they can be there. And then the ducks were more spearheaded by Ms. Allison over here.
Yes, the ducks, I was contacted by Valerie Bishop, and we coordinated with her because it was part of the 300th, obviously, as you all know, for the town. And under short order, we got our quick orders and had to get them done very quickly. And these kids here, same thing. They came up with designs, they got them approved, and they worked tirelessly because we had such a short turnaround, and they really did a great job in putting them together. So I appreciate all the work they've done. Basically, with NAHS, with Mr. Bergeron and Mr. Conlon do, is we're trying to bring art to the attention of the school and the community, and hopefully beautify it. And I think we've done it with both of those really well. So we're really appreciative that the things can be seen by in the public, and that the Ducks have had such a great run around here. They really brought up some good steam, and
it's a cult following. It's great.
We've gotten they're really attached to them right now, so so we really had fun with it. So I appreciate the offer and being able to do that with Valerie as well. So it was really great working with her.
And
Yes.
Thank you. We really appreciate the way you and your students have worked collectively with other town departments to bring art into that. Before I go to questions from my colleagues, if any of your students like to come up and just kind of talk about your art or talk about the experience.
They're really talkative.
See,
at
the
school.
musicians always want to talk.
He is actually one of our co-presidents for that.
Good.
Excellent.
Nice. So the ducks, it was actually, we found out like a week before. It was like a time cramp thing. So we actually found out, I think, was it a week we had?
Maybe 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah. And we had to come up with the designs and everything in that short time span. And we painted them in like about 2 weeks. So I'd say we spent like 2 hours every day. Like they were probably like, yeah.
Probably more.
Yeah. We stayed after. We have open studio, so we stayed like late hours, like 6 to 8 sometimes at night. After school, just like a lot of time went into them. We had a lot of fun. It was kind of stressful, but we played some music. We had fun with it. So yeah.
They went great.
Questions or comments from the committee for our artists? Anybody else? Ms. Goetz, then Ms. Denizio.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, are some of these located in the parking lot on Mansion Drive? The barriers?
Yes, yeah, the barriers.
I thought so. So I actually saw the students painting them and I was wondering what was going on. That's pretty cool. And so I think I've seen the flower one there and there might have been another one, or are they in any other locations or all four there?
So,
They are,
There's
okay.
like there's four in a row, so the tech school is gonna take one of the barriers. But we were able to do the three fronts and one of the backs because the rest is a big drop off there, so we couldn't do both sides of all of them. But when you're pulling up Mansion Drive, if you're coming from Washington Street going towards the development, you can see the back of the one, and then when you look, you can see all the rest there, and it's a great way to, where people pull in and stop, and it's got a beautiful view too, so you're looking at the barriers and you've got all the water and everything. I went last week, and it was beautiful with the sun, so.
Yeah, that area is beautiful for the
I learned from
sunset.
the email channels and just how much work went into just getting the parking lot itself to kind of be back up into like a nice spot. And
Yeah, it's
incredible.
perfect, yeah, it looks really good.
So it's in a great location if anybody wants to pick up pies. It's right near the pie factory. You can check out the artwork and also get your Thanksgiving pies, just a plug for local business, but they have great pies too.
Ms. Denizio.
Yeah, the ducks, I think, brought a lot of joy and whimsy to the community this summer, and especially my family. We love seeing them. We knew we had a busy day if we saw like 4 out of the 5. Like we knew, like we're like, wow, we've been all over. But so thank you for bringing that vision to life and a very tight turnaround. And it was also really cool to have conversations with my family about like, oh, well, Birdie, why is she named Birdie? Why is Morgan named Morgan, right? Maggie at the Aggie, all of that stuff was very cool. And the designs were very thoughtful. And I think we have a lot of photographic evidence that people in the community really, really appreciated the work. So I'm glad it was fun for you to make them, because I think you brought a lot of fun and joy to a lot of people.
Further questions or comments? Mrs. Gallivan.
Yeah, I would just say I love when there's ways to share the art with the community, because Walpole High is known for a really strong art program, and there are kids who just have so much talent, and the fact that you can say you had fun doing it makes it even more sort of inviting to the next generation of kid who might be thinking, maybe I'll do something like that someday. So thank you, that was good.
Further questions or comments? I want to thank you again. It's cool I get to wear 2 hats because I'm the chair of the 300th as well. Sorry, it was probably like Val and I's fault that we got you the info about 2 weeks beforehand, but you did great, and I would just deeply encourage you. Number one, thank you, because as you said, all this stuff was kind of after school, on the weekends, just giving your time and talents to make our town a more beautiful place, which is great. It's a great community service. But just encourage you both as educators, if we can help at all, continuing to support and find other opportunities for your students to bring their art to the wider community. I think people are really receptive, especially after these last 2 projects that were such big hits. And it's great that Mary put all of you and all of your pictures and your art out on the bulletin board, which gets a tremendous amount of traffic here at Town Hall. So before we let you go, it's great to have you all on TV, but we'd love to invite you all up for a picture with your teachers as well for our newsletter. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you guys.
Come on under.
Yeah, if you come up here and face the other way, you can see yourselves on TV.
No, you.
No, you're good.
Yeah, they see us all the time.
Well done. That was good.
You guys are the picture, not us.
Good, that was.
Mary's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I saw them painting.
Just lean out so they can shoot.
Yeah.
Just so that's
Excellent. I'm going to bypass student report. I think Bridget will give us a little update on that. We thank you so much for joining us. You're more than welcome to stay, but I know you probably have other things.
Thank you.
I am, that's in my superintendent.
All right.
Exactly.
Moving on, we have new business. MCAS presentation. Dr. Hahn?
It's me. Nothing
all you.
clears a room like an MCAS presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. To start, I think it's probably worth noting, in case there's any confusion, that tonight's presentation will not address questions about ballot question number 2, which proposed the eliminating the MCAS as a high school graduation requirement. I do want to just say that DESE has released some Q&A, things that are helpful to us for the next couple of weeks around questions with retakes, but has not done much more beyond that. We will make sure we keep our school community and this body informed as we receive more information from the Department of Education that I'll refer to today as DESE. So today, our focus will be on MCAS results and accountability data from the 2023-2024 school year. Additionally, today's presentation will differ slightly from last year's and actually probably the last several years. In the past, we've shared extensive statistical data on MCAS scores, and while I'll still provide data and charts summarizing Walpole's results, this year's presentation will include more information on how we're using this data to support improvement across disciplines. All previously shared data remains available, and I'd be happy to share specific data if you had questions or something that I've given in the past that you'd like to look a little bit deeper into. Chances are it's very likely that we have that data not only available but also organized in charts, and we'd be happy to share. I'd like to begin with a brief overview of the Massachusetts State Accountability System and how Walpole was evaluated. To start, the state accountability system assesses schools and districts based on academic performance, student growth, and additional factors to offer a comprehensive view of school effectiveness. Focus areas include ELA, math, science, technology, engineering performance, as well as graduation rates and chronic absenteeism. Schools and districts are categorized by support levels, prioritizing assistance for underperforming schools and addressing achievement gaps among student subgroups to encourage continuous improvement. School accountability percentiles in Massachusetts compare individual school performance to that of others statewide. Each school receives a percentile score from 1 to 99, indicating its relative standing among similar schools based on academic achievement and other metrics. These percentiles help us identify excelling schools and those that need additional support. Walpole schools achieve percentiles above 60%, which is important to note that indicates substantial progress towards targets, that we are not requiring any assistance or intervention from the state. It's also important to remember these scores aren't grades. So if you traditionally used to seeing a percentage, you might say, oh, 60 seems low. They are reference points for growth and improvement. And so while our schools have made solid progress, and substantial progress is something we're seeking, and we want to obviously achieve full progress, we look at this still for room for future improvement. This slide shows our district's overall performance. We use district level and school specific data to identify growth areas, which I'll discuss in more details when I dive deeper into the MCAS. And I want to acknowledge that this information can be incredibly complex, especially the chart you're looking at. After attending multiple training sessions and professional development opportunities on state accountability, and I think I probably speak for Dr. Goff as well, I'm still learning how to best utilize this data for district support because it sets benchmark measurements that can sometimes be confusing to even understand how we're achieving it. So I did want to just at least provide a slide so you can see what we look through. And this is a district-wide slide. We see this also for every school and even for breakouts of subgroups. It's a deep dive, and like I said, would be happy to go into more detail at a later meeting or maybe a subcommittee curriculum meeting. I'd also want to take a second to pause to recognize Fisher Elementary School, which was one of only 57 schools to receive a School of Recognition designation from the Department of Education. This is a tremendous accomplishment which they achieved for closing gaps and meeting benchmarks for certain subgroups. And last year, you might remember that Walpole High School was similarly recognized for this great accomplishment. All right, so as we dive a little bit further into our MCAS data, this is my yearly reminder. While MCAS data is important, it's just one way we measure student success, growth, and achievement. Our goal is to educate the whole child, helping every student become a responsible, contributing global citizen and lifelong learner. With that in mind, we'll certainly take a good look at the data and examine how our district is responding to MCAS results. Overall, the 2024 MCAS results across Massachusetts show a general decline or minimal change across subject areas for grades 3 to 8 and grade 10. Secretary Tutwiler acknowledged that results didn't show the level of improvement officials had hoped for, underscoring the continued recovery from pandemic learning loss. Walpole's results largely align with state growth trends, and overall, we did not experience significant declines in as compared to the state as much. So this chart, I just want to make a note, just so everyone knows, that final dot is the state data, just to kind of give you comparison. The first three data points are Walpole. So we, again, don't have the steep decline that was seen at the state level, but we also don't have the same trajectory of growth that we experienced in prior years. This next slide provides Walpole scores by grade level and subject compared to state averages. As you can see here and from the previous slide, Walpole Public Schools continue to perform above the state averages in every grade and assessment content area. Although some grades saw declines in certain areas, Walpole's overall scaled scores and growth remained stable compared to last year. The 8th grade STE, or Science, Technology, Engineering assessment, and 10th grade ELA assessment present the greatest opportunities for growth, while our highest gains were observed in high school science and 6th grade math. This slide provides more details about stable student performance and potential areas of growth. So I know a lot of you received this in advance, but you can dive a little bit deeper into some of the bullet points, some of the aspects we try to design. Again, sticking to the consistent theme that for the most part, we didn't see a wide range of growth or drop in any particular area. A key aspect of our MCAS analysis is reviewing achievement and growth data by subgroups. DESE provides subgroup data based on several factors, including high needs, low income, disabilities, multilingual status, race, ethnicity, and gender. Grades 3 to 8 showed stable or improving growth in ELA and math across most subgroups. However, on the next slide, you'll see in grade 10, low-income students showed a notable decline in ELA growth. Growth among multilingual learners is encouraging, showing positive progress relative to their peers, but lower growth in grade 10 ELA among students with disabilities and low-income students highlights potential areas for targeted support. Overall, these results suggest that while Walpole Public Schools is recovering well as compared to the state averages, there is ongoing work to support sustained improvement and address dips in growth, particularly in the upper grades. Our final data slide compares Walpole's achievement and growth with that of DART districts. DART provides a comparison with districts of similar size, demographics, and socioeconomic indicators, allowing us to see how Walpole performs relative to districts with similar characteristics. This slide shows Walpole's data within the median range in most areas. And just something to note, historically, that's actually not always been the case. In compared to our DART district, I would suggest we've made some gains. Some of you might even remember historically, as compared in DART, we were oftentimes the lowest in high school math, and that's no longer the case, actually starting to inch more towards the highest of our DART compared districts. The next 4 slides focus on how we are responding as a district based on the MCAS analysis. MCAS is an important resource for assessing long-term growth and identifying areas for improvement. Our curriculum leaders and department chairs closely evaluate MCAS results to inform pedagogical adjustments, curriculum alignment, and targeted interventions. So for ELA, the new K-5 literacy program, Into Reading, addresses literacy improvements by engaging students of all levels with high-quality, complex texts. This program builds skills in citing evidence, developing writing through structured steps, and following grammar and conventions. The digital assessment platform aligns with the MCAS standards, helping us to better track progress and prepare students for standardized testing. In middle school, our focus is on advancing comprehension and analytical skills. We're strengthening cross-disciplinary literacy by aligning narrative writing practices in ELA and social studies. We're also increasing opportunities for close reading and evidence citation to prepare students for complex text analysis. In high school, the focus is on enhancing students' literacy comprehension, analytical skills, and writing abilities to prepare for assessments like MCAS. In poetry, an area that we had lower scores, where emphasis is in place on understanding poetic devices and identifying main ideas, themes, and types of poems likely to appear on not only our assessments, but that similar to MCAS. Writing instruction centers on sophisticated writing skills, including theme analysis, complex sentence structure, essay writing, and synthesis of ideas from multiple sources, especially in nonfiction. In math, Our analysis identifies performance trends by focusing on questions by domains where schools scored above or below district averages or key benchmarks. This data, specifically for the elementary school mapped to Bridges curriculum, identifies opportunities for targeted instruction, practice, and assessment. Coaches are enhancing grade-specific resources to ensure effective standards alignment and sharing instructional resources. In middle school and high school, ongoing goals include refining instructional pacing and integrating real-world applications. Targeted small group interventions support underperforming subgroups with a focus on students needing additional support before the November retakes. Going back to the first slide I discussed with the graduation requirements, November retakes are still a thing, and we're asking students to still take retakes at this time. Family engagement has also been a priority that we're working more to engage parents in not only what we're doing in school, but as part of our intervention. And we're learning to use our new IXL tool to better help address learning gaps in both middle school and high school. In science, technology, and engineering, we continue monitoring the curriculum realignment initiative for the FY24 to ensure it effectively meets students' needs. Curriculum resources are reviewed regularly to meet instructional objectives, and weaknesses identified through the curriculum map are addressed proactively. This has been a huge component, especially at the middle school, where we're right in the middle of our curriculum review process, and our scores had an impact on even our next steps of how we're analyzing and continuing to choose curriculum. In physics, our 9th grade science assessment that most of our students take, teachers will observe colleagues who achieved higher student performance to explore effective teaching techniques for complex topics. Consistent incorporation of scientific notation and graphical analysis aims to strengthen student competency throughout the year. And finally, district-wide, we remain focused on professional development and instructional coaching to support real-time teacher growth, especially through differentiated instruction. Emphasis will continue on equity and inclusion to better support high-need students. And we're also strengthening our MTSS strategies across all schools by ensuring a consistent, data-driven approach aligned with our mission here in Walpole to educate every student for success. So that's a lot of information I've just given to you, and I think it was 18 slides. So I think it makes sense for me to take pause and answer any questions or listen to any comments from the committee.
Questions or comments for Dr. Hahn? Ms. Rogers?
You had mentioned, potentially more targeted support needed in the low income, especially the ELA upper grades. Just curious, thoughts on that and, what maybe we're thinking could be done in that intervention.
So I mentioned in an earlier slide, ELA in 10th grade is actually a targeted area for us. That's probably one of the areas where we need to do it. Well, we've been doing a deep analysis on how to respond and how to support all students. Our growth, our SGP overall was 43, which is lower than we would like it to be. And our achievement data was, it's not only compared to DART district, but just for our own standards, was lower than we want it to be. I've worked with Mrs. Culleton and Mr. Imbush on steps to address. We started a model with math several years ago that we're also looking to do to address specifically writing for all students, but tends to impact our higher need students more. We're also taking a look about the rigor and the curriculum alignment of our CP2 level courses, and are they meeting the needs of our students? Are we providing the instruction and the pedagogical support? One of the things I believe Dr. Goff has spoken about this year is that our high school for all teachers is doing a deep dive into professional development for differentiated instruction, and one of the drivers of that PD is looking at ways to do more to support and challenge our high need students, something that we think would benefit all teachers, but to answer your question specifically, I think would go a long way in having an impact on those ELA scores.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Ms. Gaotitz?
Yeah, so one of the areas you were talking about was grade 8 science. I know there was a drop in that. So in terms of, like, the MCAS is supposed to be measuring curriculum and what's being taught, I've heard feedback that some of what was on there may not have been gone over in class. So just wondering, like, how do you address, like, when you have gaps like that?
Yeah, so I guess there's kind of two ways to answer this question. I noted it quickly in my comments, but last year, Mrs. O'Malley and I, the department chair of science, made a change to the curriculum mapping because at some point several years ago, because it's a cumulative 6th to 8th grade test, there were some standards that the state recommends are taught in certain grade levels that we were teaching in different grade levels. So we didn't think it was a big deal as long as students were getting under the scope of 6 to 8. Last year, I didn't feel as comfortable with that. I thought the recommendation of the state had a better kind of alignment. Mrs. O'Malley agreed, and actually our science teachers agreed as well. So we started last year, and so now we're in year 2, because obviously it takes 3 years to change that sequence, to address some of the standards that were being taught out of order or not in the sequential way the state recommends. In addition, we did do an analysis of standards that were taught after the MCAS. We've been moving math back later in the year to try to make sure that we're addressing more standards in math to support some of the dips in our scores in previous years. Science has been moved up from that, so we've done like a pacing exercise this year to address and making sure that we're addressing all standards. And so to be very specific, just at our last cluster meeting yesterday, we talked about, for instance, we're spending too much time in 7th and 8th grade on lab safety. And while safety is incredibly important, we thought that's a technique that should be spiraled and shouldn't need as much time as, say, our 6th grade should be spending on lab safety. So we're going to that detailed dive to say, why are we not getting to these standards by MCAS? So besides MCAS being moved up a little bit, which I'll address with Mr. Principal Ruggiero, and some of the standards being taught after the assessment, I think it impacted the scores. Overall, the alignment, we do address every standard, but to your point, some of those standards are being hit either out of sequence or after the MCAS exam.
Okay.
Ms. Denizio.
Along that line, in terms of the 8th grade STE, I would imagine that now that we have the full middle school math department and the full middle school science department together, that there are hopefully greater opportunities for aligning the curriculum and supporting the skills that are tested in both areas of MCAS, right? Like data analysis and graphs and things like that. So just curious if we're thinking about ways that, like, similarly how we have our ELA and our social studies departments working very closely on skill building and content areas, are we thinking of ways to do that to support the STE?
So most recently, we actually did that in 9th grade. And because the cross-curricular opportunities between physics and algebra and some of the math standards, we were not capitalizing on enough. We haven't done as much of that right now. I'll be honest, our attention for the science standards, because we're deep in a curriculum review process, have been focusing on making sure we were a STEM Scopes district for several years, and that was not a curriculum that was well received by our staff, and they didn't think it was best for students, especially as there was a massive emphasis on inquiry-based learning for specifically the science standards. And a lot of our teachers started to make their own shifts in using either organic curriculum materials, shared curriculum materials, or open source curriculum materials. And Mrs. O'Malley and I, again, the science department chair, struggled last year pushing out a curriculum and decided not to because of the combination of the two schools. And we thought the combination of the two schools and all the movement, that wasn't the right time. So this year we started piloting Open Sci, which does a much better job of showing standards connections between science and engineering, science and technology. And as you noted, science as math would be an opportunity we take advantage of. It's just being transparent and honest. It's not something we spend a lot of time for the cross-curricular with math yet, but I think that opportunity will present itself as we do a little bit more to support our teachers with a subset of resources, curriculum resources, and a better standards alignment.
Another middle school question and then a couple elementary. What is, I know that we have a new math course in 7th grade that is designed to provide additional support. What are our strategies, or what strategies do we need to consider for ELA, like for kids who, if you're in middle school now, your elementary literacy experience was like maybe, there were things that we've introduced that the kids maybe weren't in kindergarten, maybe they were further along when we introduced them, and so they haven't gotten the full, like, Haggerty Foundations experience. And so how are we, like, catching the kids that need remediation and more ELA support outside of special?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I'll be able to answer that as thoroughly as perhaps you would like me to today, and that might be something that when ELA comes and presents, I can have, Mrs. Culleton and Mrs. O'Rourke spend some time addressing. I think that the greatest gap we're seeing in the MCAS is in writing, and you mentioned it earlier. One of the ways we're trying to do that is to have more structure to our writing expectations across multiple disciplines, actually including science. Science is one that we brought in this year because there's a lot of the same sequences and structures in terms of like analysis and evaluation in the labs and in the science writing. So that's one of the things we've been trying to do to improve so that students are not just seeing something for the first time. The depth around like what gaps we're seeing of students coming up, I would probably defer a little bit more to Ms. Culleton and some of our ELA teachers.
Since you brought up specificity, I'm going to put in a request for perhaps in future curriculum presentations for more specificity around our strategies for our subgroups. I know clearly you have it highlighted here as something that we really need to be looking at, but what exactly we intend to do and how we're targeting the various subgroups whose needs are not all the same, obviously, would be a question I have. And then my last one, sorry, I'm taking up a lot of airtime. One thing that I'm curious about is the wide variability in the school accountability percentiles among the 4 elementaries. There are some pretty stark differences, and I'm just curious how are we thinking about that?
Yeah, and this is where it gets a little tricky because they're not compared to one another. They're compared to their own individual targets.
Right.
And that's where it gets it's not an elementary example, but this is like what I struggle with math, for instance. So last year, you might remember we made tremendous strides in growth in achievement and in SGPs for math. And so the accountability data for the high school then sets targets based on those standards. It makes sense. I understand why they do, right? You just had a group of 10th graders that achieved that level. Now we're going to move forward and we'll expect that same kind of like growth. The hard part about it is where it gets a little more difficult and why we struggle with like how we evaluate specifically the accountability data is that it's a different now group that comes in and gets evaluated compared to the group that was there the year. So you're not even being compared to yourself. I think about that same thing for when I compare the schools to one another. So when I sit with principals and we look at the accountability data, what we try to do is find areas or find trends specific to that school that they may or may not be meeting. So I don't think, for instance, like one of our elementary schools may not even have a subgroup that they're evaluated on because they don't qualify with a certain amount of numbers, where another might. And so I just try to focus my attention with that principle to what you just asked about. What are we doing for that particular high needs subgroup? What are we doing for that group, as opposed to making comparison to elementary schools? I don't know if that answers your question, Carrie, and I'm sorry if it doesn't. Maybe you can follow it up or press me more. But I struggle around the accountability data, not because I don't think it can be helpful, but because even when you sit in PDs or when you sit in training webinars or seminars from the state, they'll even caution you, if you're anything above a 50, you should find celebration, find aspects of things. If you're making substantial growth towards targets, and then I'm like, well, we just got 0 out of 4 for a graduation. How am I celebrating that, right? And then the other part is the weight of the 40% from the year before, 60% to this year, and trying to figure out how we should be weighing that and measuring that growth. So I struggle a little bit around accountability. I don't know, Bridget, if you want to say more.
Yeah, and it does matter on your subgroups and how many subgroups you have. So if you don't have the subgroups, it can be measured a little bit differently than a school that may have 4 or 5 subgroups.
Mm-hmm. I wonder.
But you still have to look at the individual school, as Bill was saying, to figure, okay, let's look at the subgroups you have, and then how do you move those subgroups forward as they get older.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gallivan.
Just when we were talking about subgroups, I do think that there's, like, some of this will come up more as we talk about individual curriculums, but I think it would be good to look at the high-end students as a subgroup as well. Particularly, I was thinking about the fact that a couple of years ago, we took out leveling of the ELA curriculum, and what we said was we were going to measure success in terms of, are more kids getting to high places too. So I would just ask for that as a future topic.
But that's, just to clarify, that's not a designated subgroup in the accountability system. Like,
From
it's
the
something we
state
can
point
pay
of view,
attention
but we
to, but it's
can't.
not like something that we're.
Yeah, what I'm saying is we should have it as a subgroup, even though the state doesn't.
Mrs. Rogers, did you have something?
It was just a thought.
Those are good.
No thoughts, no thoughts allowed.
Really jumped. I was like very excited about on that Walpole accountability slide. And just to Carrie's point, with it looks like such a striking difference, between the elementary schools. I wonder if even having, like you have on the top, the overall one, 23 and 24. I wonder if just having even down in that when the schools are broken apart, having 23 and 24, just to look at the school's growth. It just might look a little bit less like, oh God, like some of our schools are not performing nearly as high, but if we could see at least growth year over year, just adding that column potentially.
Yeah, and it may not be, I mean, if you there's a lot, like to Dr. Hahn's point, there's a lot that goes into these numbers, and it's not apples to apples, but yes, I think year over year growth would be important, but also, like, and I know you're, like, it's important to understand that, like, the interventions and the action steps at one school may look very different from another school.
Definitely.
Depending on what we're seeing.
And again, it's so much of the accountability is whether or not the school met the individual target. So a school actually, technically, with much higher achievement, could actually score a lower accountability percentile. And that's the part that I just trying to, like, that's why it's really hard to they actually would suggest to not use these. They don't suggest. They tell you do not use these percentile data points to compare your schools within your district.
Makes sense.
Because if
So we
you're
have other
a
data points.
98, you're going to be expected to do 99, right? In simplest terms. Well, if you don't meet that target, then you're going to bump way back down.
Right.
So it's just hard. It's a little bit different with growth, and kind of what Carrie was talking about of narrowing your gaps and hitting that percentile target that they do from some formula that you need to have another degree for to figure out the formula in order to figure out each target for each subgroup.
I don't envy you having to dive so deeply.
Yeah, I mean, it just the one that I gave you is the district-wide one. That for each of those, like, subgroups, they do like a deeper target analysis of each one. So I didn't think I'd do a very good job of describing it, which is why I didn't think it was be that helpful to this presentation.
Further questions or comments? Mrs. Rogers?
I just want to say you did great. I don't want you to think you did.
That's all right. I think.
And you did do great.
One of the reasons why I actually did a little bit less data this year is the feedback I had received from a couple members was around that was a lot of data and not enough of a story or a narrative on how we're responding. So, I welcome, either for future curriculum presentations that was mentioned, because I know that even the people presenting like the feedback or like to know what the expectations are of this body. But, if there's something that you would like a deeper dive into, more information, most of the time we can achieve that. I'm going to take notes about some of the comments made today.
And I think we get that when the curriculum, when they come. So maybe even like touching upon when our, ELA comes, math comes, touching maybe upon how they're addressing some of these subgroups.
Yep.
Helpful.
I made a note. That'll be included.
To be contrarian, I think we invite you to give us more data as we break it up. I think that will be helpful, Ms. Gallivan.
Yeah, just kind of to follow up on what Adrian was saying, I think the bottom line that we want to come out of this meeting is this is good news. I mean, all of the schools have met the accountability standards. Some have just super excelled, but it's very good news that, none of them are requiring assistance or intervention.
Yeah, and I mentioned it briefly as one example, but I think I've done this presentation, but even when I was principal, I looked, one of the important data points for me is DART data. I don't think the state data is always a perfect comparison. It's a nice measuring stick, but it's not a great comparison. I can just tell you historically, Walpole has made some shifts in DART data. And we have two particular areas that stand out to me. I mentioned in my presentation, we have areas to improve. We always will. And I don't want to minimize that, but I do think we've actually made some significant strides in areas. And also, we had a drop in our 9th grade science scores last year and 6th grade math. And, we paid really close attention. Was that an anomaly? Is that going to be a trend? And, those both shot way up, which, doesn't say much except to say, all right, that might have been an anomaly. That might have been a single year. But we pay really close attention to that sort of details. On the flip side of that, we don't always just pay attention to the good news. Our 8th grade science scores, remain stagnant. That's not okay. So we address that. Our teachers, in fairness, are qualified and strong in those areas. They need more curriculum support from my office and from my end. But we're going to address that as a team, and it's going to be a theme that we don't manage in one meeting. We'll manage throughout the year.
Anything further, Mrs. Rogers?
Thank you.
Could you just, as you say that, tangentially, but not really, when we look at DART data is a slightly different data set than what we use for some of our other, like a lot of times I think we use like tech towns, or we use like the folks around us.
Yes.
DART is more like communities
DART
throughout the state.
In my opinion, DART is the best comparison, because a district that surrounds you is not necessarily a fair comparison in the same way that state data isn't always. State average data is not always a fair comparison. DART takes the same, actually subgroup data, takes the same enrollment, similar percentage of students with disabilities, similar multilingual learner, and gives you a better sense and makes a comparison to districts that look a lot more like ours.
No, that's fair. I think if no one has anything else, this is good data. I do, sort of a final thought for me that was percolating. I know we've done a lot of work. Obviously, we have one high school, we have 2 middle schools now that are one individual. I would like, as we kind of move forward, especially through the curriculum areas, I know there are 4 very distinct elementary schools, but I think in a lot of the other things we do as a body, we look to sort of regularize the experience for a student in Fisher versus Boyden versus Elm versus Old Post. So I would be sort of interested in that. I know their metrics are different, but I think that would be something I'd be interested in seeing kind of teased out, how we're addressing them all in different ways of support to hopefully more regularize their standards. And I think we'll see that when we look at the individual subject areas. I'd be interested to see what the differences are kind of in the tabs for the individual science and mathematics and reading at those levels.
Yeah, I will tell you, Mr. Buckley, that with the growth of our math and ELA curriculum, and science, there is a strong emphasis on making sure that we're calibrated at our elementary schools. We do have one school that is a qualified Title I support that is, by the definition of Title I, supposed to get more support and staffing and resources. That's not a Walpole thing, that's a federal mandate. But outside that, we do as deep of a dive, which obviously would be not appropriate here, to school analysis and classroom analysis. And there is not a stark difference, whether you're in any 4 of our elementary schools, your child's receiving a really strong education. We present our 3 to 8 data, but I'll just tell you guys, the 3 to 5 data, our elementary schools are some of the strongest in the state, all 4 of them. That is where we have some of our strongest data and our strongest numbers. And so, I know that's 4 different schools, and sometimes people talk about some of the differences, and each of those schools have their own communities and their own cultures. But in terms of an education and the academics, there's an incredible level of consistency in things that we've really teased out and paid attention to, that I'm very proud of, and I think the principals would tell you the same thing. We're still certainly areas for improvement. Talking with a group of elementary principals today about consistent homework of policies and practices and approaches. Like, we're always talking, but we're talking well beyond what we used to around standards, alignments, and delivery. And the curriculum and some of the curriculum leaders we have are a big reason for that.
Good. Excellent. Moving on, Assistant Superintendent Frischer with our budget timeline. Less data, more dates.
Oh, you want to clear a room, Bill? I usually clear it with this one, so enclosed in your packet is a timeline for FY26 budget process for the school year 25-26, and it starts in, obviously, November of 2024, coming up very soon. We first release our budget templates to the principals where they fill out all their goods and service requests for supplies and materials that teachers use in their classrooms, and custodial supplies and all those things that we use to maintain our buildings and keep moving throughout the school year. That's on November 18th. December 5th, we meet as a leadership group between the school committee and the administrative leadership team, where we talk about our goals and aspirations for the next school year. And then we also discuss the challenges that we face and how we can navigate those challenges that recur year over year, and some are unique depending on the school year that we're in. That's on December 5th. December 6th, the principals hand in their justification sheets, which explain how they came up with each line within their budget. So it breaks it down to actual supply lists and details right down to the finest level that make up their requests for goods and services. December 9th, the superintendent and I meet with the administrative team to talk about their budgets, why they're requesting what they're requesting, maybe what's unique this year. Are they shifting money around from budget line to budget line? Generally, in the past, these budgets have been level funded because that's the means that we have to support our schools. If they're adequate, we're okay with that, but we do get requests periodically to increase or supplement a budget at a particular school, and we're always open-eared to that and willing to listen, and sometimes we do increase those budgets. The central office budget, that's district-wide. Generally, that has to go up because that has our bus contract and things of that sort that increase on a yearly basis. So that's December 9th. Once the new year begins, January 9th, we have the school committee. You guys receive your goods and service and personnel budgets. So you can start to deliberate, think about those figures, and obviously ask questions as we prepare for our public budget hearing, which happens on January 21st this year, where we present to the public and have a discourse about how our budget was developed and what kind of priorities we're looking at and what needs we may have once again. And then January 23rd, the school committee votes on an FY26 tentative best case budget is what we call it. We generally vote the budget that we would love to see and be able to have, and if that is fully funded, that's great. Then we don't really need to continue to go back and forth with the town administration and the committees and town finance committee. But generally, we don't get fully funded, and that's an ongoing deliberation as we move toward town meeting. Once we get to town meeting, we have our budget pretty much finalized at that point, and then the town votes to hopefully approve our budget. And that is on May 5th. Throughout this process, we meet with the town administrator repeatedly and ongoingly. We meet with the finance committee. Sometimes if we're talking about capital, we meet with the capital committee. So it is a very democratic, open and transparent process throughout. And simultaneously, as we're doing this and going through this process, we are managing the 25 budget, our current budget. And this year, we have the challenge of negotiating with our teacher union, ESPs, and our custodians this year. So while we're going through this process, we will also be negotiating. What makes this uniquely challenging in this type of year is that we don't know what our collaborative bargaining agreements are as far as COLA increases and things of that sort, which are decided throughout the negotiation process. So we do our best to project out what we think those numbers will look like so we can fully fund our budget. And that is an outline of the budget process.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Fisher. It's important to note, I think, for those of us who've done this for a while, we're getting earlier and earlier. In part, I think most of our meetings were completely in January to start with, and we started a few years ago having that initial discussion in December as we dialogue more closely with the town because there's so many pieces of the funding picture, especially with state and federal aid and out-of-district placements and things like that are up in the air. I believe in the next few weeks we may have another 3-board meeting as we've had in the past on the horizon as well. So it's a long process. This is the very beginning of it. And any other questions about the timeline or process? Seeing none, it's the first year on a roll.
Yeah.
Next order of business we have is a request, I just covered my agenda, a request for approval of the authorization of the superintendent to sign an agreement with Mobile Modular Management Corporation for modular classrooms at Boyden School. As a refresher, we were successful in receiving a capital request for 2 modular units at Boyden Middle School this past town meeting. I think the entire body, we were all out there. We took a tour of Boyden, we looked at the site, hands-on ourselves. As we said at the public hearing, this is a very tight timeline, and in order to have it completely constructed, ready to go, hooked up, and part of the superstructure for the kiddos with at the start of 25 in September, we need to sort of get the ball rolling. So what is before you is just a request to have the superintendent sign on our behalf to begin the project. Anything further? That's about.
We met Tuesday with a lot of the department heads for DPW, Jim Johnson, Patrick Shield was there, the project manager for Mobile Modulars, obviously Brendan Dearborn was there, and we moved the location of the modular. So where you saw it is not where it's going to be. We're hoping that it will be at the end of, between the edge of Boyden Elementary and the pools. There's a space that you probably look at and say, you can't fit modulars in there, but we think we can. So it'll be out of sight, away from the playground. We won't have to move swing sets, be much less costly, really fits in nicely. And a lot of that actually came from Jim Crowley, our building inspector, who he and I sat down, looked at it, and on his software, we were able to play around with the footprint of this thing and squeeze it in there. And when they came out to look at it, they said, yeah, that looks like that'll work. So we kind of settled on that spot. So it was exciting that it won't be something that you see immediately when you come to Boyden Elementary. It'll be in the back, but it'll serve our students really well.
Questions or comments for Tricia? Ms. Anicio?
I wanted to say, I know that the Boyden community will appreciate the thought that went into the placement and putting it somewhere that is the least disruptive possible to the extended day program and the recreational area and the traffic pattern.
Yes.
For pickup and drop off. So I will make a motion to approve the agreement with Mobile Modular Management Corporation for a modular 2 classroom building. Make a motion to authorize the superintendent to sign the Mobile Modular Management Corporation agreement related to modular classrooms to be installed at Boyden School.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Anicio, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700.
Thank you.
Have
Can
fun.
I just ask a couple questions?
Yeah, a couple more questions. Mrs. Gallivan.
So, Mike, just looking at this, am I correct to say that we came in significantly under what was budgeted? Or am I am I being too optimistic?
Well, we came in at 656. We had 950,000 approved. There is a lot of site work that takes place, which was on one of these pages that it listed it's this one on page 3 of 7, where it lists electrical service connections, fire and sprinkler, fire alarm system, gutters and downspouts. All that's above the 6.
Okay, that was my question.
But the good news is some of these things we won't have to worry about because, like, for example, sprinklers, the way the building is designed, we won't need that, and that will save us about $70,000. So I think we'll be able to put these buildings in place and then outfit them appropriately, like we did with our middle school, with all the latest technology, and they'll have HVAC, they'll have some really nice amenities to them.
So budget-wise, we're
We
well
are
set.
probably going to wind up, knock on wood, under budget. That would be my goal.
Okay, great. And the other thing I would just say for the people that are listening, this is because of a growth in our special ed population, but it's excellent conditions. It's not by any means something that is less than in any way. In other words, this is probably going to be prime classroom property down at Boyden, and it's going to be well done.
Yeah.
So that's good too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else? Excellent. Moving on, Superintendent's report, Dr. Goff.
Yes, thank you. So first, I just want to provide an update on some of our pillars that were outlined in our Planning for Success model and, where we are to date with some of it. So one of our teaching and learning objectives is to enhance student engagement by fostering what's known as student-centered learning in every classroom from pre-K through grade 12. So to achieve this, we've set a strategic initiative to develop the Leadership Council's capacity for supporting student-centered practices through targeted professional development. We have to make sure as a Leadership Council that we are consistent and on the same page in order to provide that for our leaders in the schools. So this training utilizes both internal expertise and external resources to ensure our best practices. So we started by focusing on professional development, like I mentioned within our LC, and this began with a baseline assessment to understand current practices, definitions, and comfort levels with differentiated and student-centered instruction. This feedback revealed varying definitions and entry points, which highlighted a need for a unified understanding across all leadership. So based on these initial insights, Dr. Hahn analyzed the data and identified several core themes. We've selected 3 highly regarded books on differentiated instruction to guide our sessions. The Differentiated School, Leadership for Differentiated Schools and Classrooms, and Leading with Differentiation, Growing Teachers Who Grow Kids. And they're all by Carol Ann Tomlinson. She's the leading author, the leading guru of differentiated instruction. So all of these books emphasize the shared themes of instructional differentiation, teacher support, and responsive leadership in building inclusive and effective learning environments. Chosen book will serve as a common framework, grounding our work in current research-based strategies. We've noticed that in training student-centered practices in differentiated instruction, it tends to be more prevalent at the elementary and middle schools due to the undergraduate and graduate training, while at the high school level, most professional development is content-focused. So given this, as Dr. Hahn mentioned, Walpole High School is committed to a full year of training focused on differentiated instruction, setting an example of deep school-wide commitment. Going forward, the professional development will continue with regular opportunities for reflection, collaboration, and adjustment. The Leadership Council will work to refine these strategies and model differentiated practices, assuring that each school leader is equipped to support a more personalized learning experience for every student in their schools. It is important that we empower our Leadership Council to be at the forefront of student-centered instruction. This work is foundational to creating a more engaging, responsive, and ultimately successful educational experience for all our students in the district. We've also, under the teaching and learning pillar, focused on identifying and defining key models of inclusive practices to ensure that every student can engage fully in our curriculum. So throughout our Leadership Council, we're examining what tiered support and interventions, or what you've heard as MTSS, looks like across the schools, all of our schools in our district. Each school could speak well to what they do and how they do it, but this work is critical as aligning this approach vertically across all levels ensures that each school not only understands their specific practices, but how these efforts fit into our district-wide goals. Aligning the tiered support practices allows us to share a clear, consistent approach, making it easy to measure how we use resources, identify where additional supports may be needed, and understand our data more effectively. With this consistent model, we're better positioned to provide high-quality, inclusive learning environments at every grade level, from pre-K through high school. So we're encouraged by this collaborative work happening, and as we refine these practices, we look forward to updating you further. In terms of the school and community culture pillar, currently, as you know, each school has its own set of core values. They're wonderful, but as you know, the district does not have a unified set of core values. So to address this, we have developed a structured timeline, agenda, draft statement, expectations, and a protocol for this process. This framework outlines the steps that will follow to create a consistent district-wide set of core values. This month and next month, principals are actively working with their school councils to review and discuss these materials, and the next step will be to gather feedback from a variety of stakeholders, students, families, educators across the district. By developing and following this timeline, we're ensuring that every voice is heard and that the final set of values truly represents our collective vision. Also, in terms of school and community culture, we had the initiative to expand access to after-school programming at our new combined middle school for the 2024-25 school year. Our goal is to ensure that every middle school student has the opportunity to engage in extracurricular and academic programs to meet their interests and support their development. Thanks to the hard work of our middle school principal, Ruggiero, and Dan Santangelo, extended day director, we've already begun actively building a range of clubs and activities. Dan's focus has been on establishing consistent opportunities for students, including after-school academic support and interest-based enrichment activities. And I gave you a handout of just the things that we've just started this fall. Principal Ruggiero has been working on clubs such as drama, ski and snowboarding club, and math counts. And the ski, board, and snowboard, I think we had like 3 buses. It's been very well received. And those are in your handouts, but that's just a snippet of one of her s'mores. We are also in the process of examining the opportunity for middle school athletics. Currently, we're laying the groundwork for competitive sports by researching how similar programs have been launched in their middle schools. Ed Connor, who's working with our AD, has been exploring logistics involving adding sports such as track, volleyball, and cross-country, and coordinating with neighborhood towns to create competition opportunities. This involves, as you know, significant planning. But however, we may even be able to get spring track and field going this spring, followed by cross-country and volleyball with other towns next year. Currently, as you know, volleyball is an after-school activity and will continue throughout the year. So having like more of intramural competing with each other. We're evaluating and adjusting programs in real time. This ensures that we're responding to students' needs and enhancing what we offer. We're carefully tracking enrollment programs and gathering feedback so each offering has the chance to thrive and reach students that will benefit the most. We anticipate that by building the foundation this year, we can create a sustainable model that can support even greater participation and success in the future. And then finally, under finance and operations, Mike Fisher already discussed the modulars being installed at Boynton Elementary School to accommodate our increasing enrollment in our high needs special education population. So I think that's a lot that's been done that we started in late July, and it's November. So we'll continue to update you as, through my superintendent's report as we, and you can see how some of these activities align with our pillars. Okay, to move on?
Go on.
Okay. I attended the Unified Banner Ceremony this morning at Walpole Middle School. It was fantastic. I'm sure the pictures will come out. Where our middle school received the National Banner recognition, they came to school committee a couple of meetings ago. We were thrilled to honor and celebrate the unity, inclusion, and spirit of teamwork for our unified sports program. So I just want to congratulate again all the coaches, the staff, the student athletes on this well-deserved honor. We actually asked the head of, who came down, Patty, for the Unified Sports Program, if we could host the Spring Jamboree at our middle school. She looked at the gym and said, I don't see why not. So that will be really, really exciting. So that's a lot of different schools at Walpole Middle School. It was also exciting to watch some of the MIA playoffs this weekend. I was able to watch our girls soccer team on Friday and our field hockey team on Saturday. Good luck to the football team on Friday versus Billerica. I'm looking forward to watching also our field hockey team take on Andover again and again and again at the state championship game on Saturday at 5 o'clock at Worcester State. And the cross-country all-state championship is on Saturday at 1 at Fort Devens. So I'll get to Fort Devens at 1 and then get over to Worcester for 5. Okay. So last week, Nancy, Bill, and I had the opportunity to attend the MASS conference. This is the largest annual gathering of education leaders in Massachusetts. The conference consisted of many workshop opportunities and in-depth discussions of the critical education issues of today. And it also afforded us the opportunity to collaborate with one another, with other school committees, and other superintendents across the state. So it was a really some great workshops. Regarding scholarships, you should have received an email from Mary about the applications, and we have that meeting December 9th, Mary, at 6 o'clock, right, to discuss these applications. I can't believe I'm saying this, but snow days, with winter soon approaching, I'd like to remind everyone about our snow day procedures. Yes, the superintendent of school is responsible for the final decision to cancel school based on weather-related factors and information received from the Department of Public Works, who are wonderful. In the event, just remember, we'll communicate through various channels, and we have Thrill Share, which is fantastic in terms of communicating. Please note, I still get this question. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education will not allow remote learning days to replace snow days. We have to make them up at the end of the year. And we've got Thanksgiving break coming up. It's hard to believe. Early release is that Wednesday before the break, the 27th, and no school on Thursday and Friday. And I hope everyone has a well-deserved break to relax and spend time with some family and friends. Oh, that was a mouthful, but I'll have my water now.
Questions or comments to the superintendent? I know the volleyball folks are very happy to see that in the offerings so soon after we combine the schools. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, and there's a lot of activity programs already in the fall, so.
Moving on, our next order of business, old business, middle school building project. Mr. Brain?
So, we'll say the usual. I think they're going to be off-site by the end of this month, more or less off-site. Punch list items after that, return in the spring for any landscaping that needs to be repaired after winter damage or something like that, but it's pretty much done, 97% done, I think they said the other day.
Yeah, every time I go there, more trees are being brought
Yeah,
in, so
right.
they're bringing in the trees.
On time and on budget.
A few more times. Walpole High School project.
We have
Mr. Fisher?
OAC, your kickoff, we had the kickoff meeting for Walpole
We
High
had
School.
the kickoff meeting for the high school. Yeah, there was probably 30 people in the room. It was a massive group. Hopefully, the meetings going forward will be smaller, more efficient, effective. But yeah, Stephen was there, Stephen Ambush, principal, high school. The new construction firm was there. It's a design bid build, not CM at risk. So the feel in the room is much different. It's much more defined. There's not as much collaboration, even though it's collaborative, it's not as much as what we had. So it's a different feel, but it's going well so far. Fences are going up. If you're up at the high school, you'll see where they're outlining where the new field house will be fenced off after Thanksgiving. So you'll see where that's going to be going. But right now, Turco Field has a fence up as they prepare to do the parking lot out behind the snack shack. So that's step one. So this thing is starting earlier than I think anyone anticipated. So
Yeah, and then we'll have the focus at permanent building committees. But we haven't had one yet between that meeting, and I'm sure there's one coming up.
you guys can do the updates.
We'll do the updates after the permanent building committee meetings.
Nothing further. Subcommittee activity.
Can I just mention, I'll give you the exact date, but we do have a legislative breakfast scheduled in March. The time is TBD. I'll get the date. I know there was some talk about maybe moving it up, because March sometimes is late when you're trying to advocate for your legislators to increase your Chapter 70 and increase your special ed transportation, increase your Chapter 70, increase your special ed transportation. And you know, it's sometimes it's late in the year, but right now there's a tentative March date set. So I'll have Mary send that date out. And I don't think they've had, I don't know if anybody's heard of a place yet, because they'd like to go to different places.
So this is the one with multiple
This
districts?
is with the Tech Collaborative.
I think Tech might be doing something in addition to
Okay.
what the
To
Tri-County
the Tri-County one?
superintendents are doing.
Okay, so the Tri-County one and then the Tech Collaborative.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, I don't know, I don't think anything's definite, but I
Okay.
think there might be two
So we'll get a
events.
list of
Yeah.
we'll get the list and because those will be important.
Anything further on the subcommittees? Seeing none, citizens' comments. Patrick, nothing? Got nothing? Moving on to approval of warrants, donations, and minutes. Ms. Rogers.
I would like to make the motion to approve the following warrants. We have accounts payable, payroll, warrant number 2515 PS, for the amounts listed in your packets.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rogers, second by Ms. Sarek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 600.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable.
7, sorry. Didn't see your hand.
The accounts payable schools, accounts payable special education, both under warrant number 225017 for the amounts listed in your packets.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rogers, second by Ms. Sarek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700.
For accounts payable schools and food services, both under warrant number 225018 for the amounts listed in your packets.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rogers, second by Ms. Sarek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700.
And finally, accounts payable schools and special education, both under warrant number 225019 for the amounts listed in your packets.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rogers, second by Ms. Sarek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700. I think you did miss 215.
Oh, which one did I say?
251.
The second one.
Payroll. Oh, I was too excited. Accounts payable schools.
No.
What's that? The second
Second.
one. Oh, it snuck in
251.
there. Just accounts payable payroll 2517 PS. Yes, there it is. For the amount listed in your packet.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rogers. Just pay everybody, second by Ms. Sarek. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700. Moving on, we have gift donation approval. Someone would like to take the gifts.
I'll take it. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following gifts and donations. To Walpole Middle School from the Junior Women's Club of Walpole School Health Office donation for $200. To Boyden Elementary School from the Junior Women's Club of Walpole School Health Office donation for $200. This will sound very familiar after a while. Elm Street Elementary School Junior Women's Club of Walpole School Health Office donation of $200. To Fisher from the Junior Women's Club of Walpole School Health donation for $200. The same for Old Post and Walpole High School from the Junior Women's Club for $200. And for Fisher Elementary School from Bay State Textiles for $105.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Sarek, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700. Very generous donations. Approval of minutes. Someone like to take that?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the school committee meeting minutes for October 24th, 2024.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rogers, second by Mr. Breen. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700. Mr. Breen, would you like to take us home?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Breen, second by Ms. Rogers. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained, 700. Thank you very much. Have a very lovely Thanksgiving.
March 20.